Black Phone 2! All right, if you've been around the channel for a little bit of time, you might remember I was a little bit of an outlier on my opinion of the original Black Phone. I thought it had a lot of good ideas. I think the Grabber as a villain is incredibly menacing and gross with incredible design choices. But overall, I felt that the movie got a little bit goofy in areas, and then it made certain choices that pulled a lot of tension out of what was happening, and I do think that this movie has a lot of those same problems, and I just wish that original one had steered harder into the chilling side. I get that we were dealing with kids, but it felt very disjointed for how intense they let it get in some places, for how much they weakened it in others. Though I will say, rewatching it after seeing this new one, I appreciate it a lot more than I did back when I originally saw it, but I do think when I originally saw it, it was getting so many rave reviews that maybe my expectations were a little bit higher than they should have been, and I also think that the short story, the tension was just handled there better than what we got in the movie. At the time, I also wish we had gotten a little bit more backstory, at least more general info on the Grabber as a person, but with part 2 giving me that, I'm not really a fan of the direction that they chose, more so because of the way they try to connect it all in. It was just not the information I wanted. And I get it, you have the super creepy villain, serial killer, predator type thing. You want to kind of leave some enigma there to make it really scary, but this is a character that I think that knowing a little bit more isn't necessarily going to take away how chilling and scary they are, because they are just inherently so terrifying. Not trying to be a hater though, I definitely think there's things this second installment did that are better than the first movie, but it also falls into a lot of those same issues while creating a bunch of new ones, in my opinion. Now, for those unaware, The Black Phone is a movie based on the short story by Stephen King's son Joe Hill about a serial killer child predator named the Grabber in 1978. The movie focuses on one of the abducted boys, Finney, his time in this basement, and the mysterious black phone on the wall that rings the longer Finn is trapped. On the end are the previous victims of the Grabber helping him from the afterlife. Pretty cool concept all around, really terrifying situation, but the movie also added in that the sister is kind of psychic, and that just felt kind of stupid. And if you also felt that was a little bit stupid, you were gonna have a really bad time with part 2. Though I will say the way they visually implement it into the story, she has all these premonition style dreams, that looks really cool. I think that is a really good idea. I just don't necessarily love how they execute it all the time. It's very hard to explain why I both have an issue with it, but then it ends up being some of the most creative aspects of the movie. If you want to know more details on part 1 and the short story, feel free to check out my first video linked down below. Also, I recently found out that one of the shorts in a VHS movie, VHS 85, has a segment that exists within the Black Phone universe called Dream Kill, which is directly tied into that psychic aspect with the sister, because the teen in this movie is their cousin. It doesn't really tie into the movie in any other way, so I'm not going to go over it, but it's kind of neat. But the no spoiler rundown on Black Phone 2, we are in 1982, 4 years after the events of the first movie, and Finney, as expected, has a ton of trauma to work through. And instead of handling that properly, they are going to make the sister Gwen a much larger focus of this movie. Boo. And I think that's fundamentally what annoys me about this movie the most. There is an amazing movie in here if they had just chosen to aim their focus in different directions. They do up the tension really well in certain areas, push the brutality just enough to make things really unsettling, implement the dream scope psychic stuff in a way that feels really chilling. They use Super 8 cameras to film those sections so you gotta have a really clear distinction between what was really happening and what was happening in a dream. But it also just really adds to the ambience of those scenes and makes them super chilling. It's kind of like stumbling on the home videos made by a serial killer. But then they just do so much to undercut that tension and creepiness. For example, pulling back on the thing that I feel makes the Grabber the most terrifying, which I'll get into more later, but the only thing that's worse than a guy who's gonna kill things is one who's gonna do other things to them first. And maybe after, I don't actually know. It's just so frustrating to me to have this piece of media that is so close to being genuinely chilling and terrifying and then just undercutting it in really weird ways, both heavily borrowing from Nightmare on Elm Street and falling completely short of it. Unfortunately, the sister's given some pretty horrible dialogue to work with and struggles to deliver it at the best of times, which absolutely leads to some moments of laughter that were not intended. She had a handful of swearing zingers in the first movie that worked because she was just this little kid, but they're trying to have her deliver the same quips now 4 years later and expecting it to have the same effect. It's also a movie that doesn't trust its audience at all, so every time it shows us something, the sister then has to repeat it to another character in a way that vaguely feels like a Darman video. I only ever saw a teaser for this movie, and I feel like that even focused more in on the brother, so it's the marketing knew what character it should have been focused on. The Grabber's still terrifying, mostly. There's definitely a couple moments that get away from them on ice. Yes, on ice. And honestly, after rewatching the first movie, it doesn't hold a candle to how creepy and unsettling he is there. I really like the wintry setting they go with, though there are a couple things that happened that made me wonder if anybody working on this movie spent any significant time around snow, but that might be just a Canadian nitpick. The movie also gets weirdly religious at times, more religious than The Conjuring, which has the entire shtick of religious intervention, so that was interesting. There were elements of it in the first movie, but because I guess we're focused more on the sister, who was the one who had the Jesus stuff in the first movie, it's obviously more present in this installment. But if you find yourself overrun by phone calls with nefarious intentions, today's sponsor, Incogni, is here to help. It is easier than ever for people to look up and exploit your personal information. That means phone numbers, addresses, family names, and sometimes even your social security number. Especially in the United States, where people searching sites are more common than ever, providing detailed personal profiles for scammers to use. If you're lucky, it'll just be a variety of scam calls and emails trying to make a quick dollar. But in the worst case scenario, some of these people might have specific information to target you and your family. Finding ways to exploit the most vulnerable, single parents, people in extreme debt, and elderly family members who don't have the ability to screen out scams. I've seen so many videos where scammers pretend to be family members in trouble, getting fake bail money out of grandparents before anyone even realizes that something's going on. And I know that's only going to get worse with AI in the mix. Incogni can help put a stop to this by scanning the web for your information and sending requests on your behalf to have it removed from those sites. They also allow you to put in custom removal requests if you happen to notice your information somewhere before Incogni manages to get to it. But usually once I'm noticing an uptick in spam, Incogni's already working on a fresh batch of removal requests on my behalf. And once those requests go through, you won't have to worry about anything. They'll just constantly keep searching on your behalf and handling any objections. All you have to do is make an account, give Incogni the okay to work on your behalf, and they'll keep you updated as they handle that back and forth stress-free. So check out incogni.com/Amanda or use code Amanda to get 60% off an annual plan and let Incogni take care of the headaches of data removal. Ultimately, when they're focusing on Finn, things are really interesting and they're dynamic, and he's got such a complex story to work with, and the way they incorporate the phone early on is so chilling and sad, which I'll get to. It just ends up undercut by focusing on a character that is so much less interesting to follow, even though she's got this entire very interesting shtick. Okay, let's dive into the spoilers for this one. As usual, we will be going through the movie in detail, so if you haven't seen it and don't want spoilers, you have been warned. But I will clarify one thing from the get-go, because some people were arguing with me when the last movie came out, but the grabber is not just a child serial killer. He is also a PDF. He likes to do other things with kids. He's based on John Wayne Gacy. They just swapped him from a clown to a magician because It had recently come out and they wanted to create some separation there. It's very clear in the short story. The movie makes it pretty damn clear without actually having to show it, and Cargill, co-writer of the movie, has confirmed that's absolutely what he is, but it just didn't need to be explicitly shown. Not a matter of debate, and it's absolutely the thing that makes the grabber that much more disturbing than he would be as just a killer. And the reason why I'm so terribly uncomfortable that you can buy a grabber Funko Pop.
I will never make you do anything that you won't like.
Okay, with that done, movie time! So we actually start back in 1957 with a girl at a winter camp saying that she dreamt the phone number she just dialed carved in ice by young boys beneath a lake. Now, based on the wintry setting of the posters and the teaser I saw, and the fact that this movie is supposed to be taking place with the original cast in the present, I'm betting we're getting a little bit of psychic time travel here. So from the get-go, I figured that the sister's psychic dreams were going to be a major component of this movie, which for those who don't remember was completely added to the original movie to flesh out the short story. The story actually leaves the supernatural nature of what's going on up to reader interpretation, whether or not he's actually getting calls from beyond the grave, or if it's just the coping mechanisms of a scared child, which I did like, but I'm also okay with the movie taking a more hardline stance so they can flesh it out in certain ways, as long as they don't get too wacky with it, which we'll see. The scene kind of has some cheesy dialogue, but it's an interesting setup before we cut ahead to 1982 with Finn, who really hasn't adjusted well after his kidnapping, which seems totally fair even now that the dad is sober and actually being a parent. That level of trauma is going to leave scars, especially in a time where support probably wasn't as readily available. He's got discipline issues, he gets in fights, and he smokes pot to drown out the memories and moments he's still tormented by the grabber. I will say that the opening scene of him beating up this other kid is so similar to the beginning of the last movie that it almost felt like a one-for-one, but I get the parallel between like what Robin did in the first movie, what he's doing now, whatever. We also get a super chilling scene where he's smoking pot in his backyard and he's looking out into the distance and sees the grabber just beckoning him over. He's clearly not actually there, but it is oh so creepy. Just repeating that line from the first movie, if you touch me, I'll scratch your face off.
If you try to touch me, I'll scratch your face.
Which also lets us know that there's just as much fear behind Finn's anger. All good signs early on. I'm really digging what they're putting down. It just keeps getting more chilling when we go through this weird nightmare of the camp, a young boy being chased through the woods before he's brutally murdered, floating up underwater to scratch a W in the ice. And that actually has to be one of the more graphic things I've seen in a black phone movie, to the point that, spoiler alert, according to someone who says they saw this at a Q&A with Derrickson, they said to stay in the R rating, they really couldn't do anything to the adult or older characters present in the movie because of what they did to the younger characters in these like flashbacks. I don't fully know how true that is, and I definitely feel like there was a way around it. But yeah, some pretty visceral images shot in Super 8. But these psychic dreams seem to specifically be leading the sister to earlier victims of the grabber, actively having her sleepwalk towards something when she leaves the layer of the dream that's back at the camp. And I love all that. It's super creepy. The shooting style and editing is perfect. It's just what I'm looking for from this movie. It's just a deep discomfort and chill that I'm feeling in every one of these moments. And this happens a couple more times, just all these moments of kids at camp having fun before one of them ends up chased through the woods by a shirtless man, pretty clearly implying that this is the grabber. This kid ends up hacked up by an axe before being lit on fire, floating up from under the water to etch a bee in the ice. Oh my god, guys, the killer's actually Warner Brothers. I'm sorry, that's so stupid. The tension's pretty much completely gone once we get to the real world though, and I realize that a movie doesn't have to be like non-stop tense, but it's like we're just getting this weird like flirty banter between Gwen and Ernesto, the brother of one of the victims, Robin, telling him about the dreams she has and basically ending it off with an iconic Riverdale line.
I'm weird. I'm a weirdo.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what she says. It's not all hopeless though. Like I said, there are still some other scenes with Finn. I really like this one where he's walking by a ringing out of order payphone and just saying, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." Meaning that even after the events of the last movie, something is still trying to reach him from the other side. And I just love that touch. That he's still being haunted in every possible way. The brief question of whether it's even happening or if it's just his trauma making him think someone's calling. In the bounds of this universe, he is absolutely really getting these calls, and that is honestly just as disturbing and heartbreaking than if it was just a trauma reaction. That even after 4 years, he can't have peace. This moves us right into the dream sequence of the burning boy I mentioned, where Gwen ends up walking up on him in like the sleepwalking stage of her dream, just this burning body with various chopped limbs around it. Again, I'm genuinely surprised they went that hard than the visuals involving the kids, but it's like they're shying away from the child predator part and making up for it with gruesome imagery. This sleepwalking session actually brings her back to the grabber's house, where she answers the ringing phone to hear that young girl from the beginning of the movie, who was her mother? Yeah, we're doing familial psychic time travel here. How connected are things gonna be? Because the one thing that always feels lazy is when they find too many ways to have everything connected to the same little group of people. We do get a nice little jump scare here of the grabber's brother showing up with the axe in his head, so I guess he'll be relevant for something. But Finn shows up at this point, bringing her out of the dream while she's desperately trying to convince him that the things in her dreams matter, showing us that the blood she stepped on in the dreamscape actually seems to be on her foot. Absolutely establishing that whatever happens in that like weird little interim sleepwalking zone will reflect in reality. Full Nightmare on Elm Street rules. But I am genuinely surprised that Finn went back into that house even if it was to get his sister. From here, Gwen decides she wants to go to the Alpine Lake Youth Camp because apparently they realize that the mom worked there and she wants to get to the bottom of whatever's happening with those young boys. Apparently it's a Christian youth camp, which tracks. I feel like almost every summer camp here has some kind of religious affiliation, and it was just a matter of how much it found its way into daily activities. The amount it will work its way into this movie though, I was not expecting. Though when I went back and watched the original movie, the sister is asking Jesus for help a lot, but again, it was just like the tone and how it's expressed in this new movie that I find is more like disjointed. And as I've mentioned, I think it's because the movie is too focused on Gwen, so this thing that worked and was like kind of cute and goofy when she was a middle school student just feels sincere in a weird way now that we're in the sequel and she's older. Though we did see this with a very Southern audience and a lot of those people were very into that aspect, so mileage may vary. Regardless, Gwen sets off to be a counselor in training to learn more with her little boyfriend in tow, and Finn decides to join in at the last minute. As they're driving, a huge storm starts off, there's cars off the road, then to make sure they don't go off too, Finn offers to run in front of the car. I'm sorry, has anyone involved in the logistics of this movie ever been involved in like a snowstorm, whiteout conditions, a blizzard, like anything? Whatever. Soon enough, they come across Mustang, one of the employees that gets them back to the camp. Guess they were the only counselors that didn't get the message to not show up because of the storm. Finn immediately takes notice of that phone booth from the beginning of the movie that's just ominously at the edge of the lake before they all get split off to their separate cabins, where Gwen has another dream of a murdered boy, head axed in half, who leaves the last letter H. So I'm guessing that's supposed to be the killer's initials, WBH. I know in the book the grabber's name was Albert. Very possible it was changed in the movie, or this is just a different clue entirely. Good scares here though. The kids start coming to torment her in this in-between state, and they're just like desperate for help, but it's a lot more menacing than the kids' spirits from the first movie, but I guess these ones have been dead longer, so they're probably a little bit more hostile. And while Gwen's going through that, Finn hears the phone booth ring once again, leaving whoever's on the other end with a, "I'm sorry, I can't help you, except this time it was the grabber."
Hello, Finny.
Chilling, a nightmare. Your greatest tormentor and abuser is like back from the grave, or maybe in a worse place, because how do you kill what's already dead? Only managing to escape that phone booth once he hears Gwen screaming, thinking she's losing her mind. And again, they really just try to drive home that whatever's going to happen to her in that dream state will happen to her in real life. Like the burned boy grabs her arm, and then her arm is actually burned when she wakes up. We then completely pull back from any of that tension to have a little romance pick up between her and Ernesto. I get that on the surface it's kind of cute, but I just didn't think this movie needed it at all. Just Doesn't need to be here. Get rid of it. And some of the lines here were funny on purpose and others not so much. Like when she just keeps asking Jesus to like stop having dreams. Goofy. Ernesto thinking her talking to Jesus is hot, intentionally funny. But it's all just starting to feel a little bit too, dear God, it's me, Margaret, for my liking. A lot of this conversation seems to just exist to give us information from the first movie, that her mom also had these dreams that drove her to take her own life, that she's afraid that the same thing will happen to her. Fine and dandy, I get the struggle, could have done with a lot more of it, but still, why can't we focus on Finn and his trauma? It just keeps dancing around it. It honestly seems like they really don't want to go in on what the grabber really was and what the grabber was planning, so they just avoid it. You will have a moment with the main camp guy Mondo later where he gets called out for using his anger to cover up the fear. They'll try to give him some moments of growth, but I'm just left wanting so much more. Not to say that Finn has no moments, like the next day the phone rings for him again, but this time it's the missing boys. They don't remember who they are, what happened to them, just that they don't belong where they are, and it's cold. And I do really love how these movies handle that like purgatory style afterlife, that things just start getting taken from you the longer you're dead. It is pretty dark that murdered kids can't rest until their bodies are found, but it's that type of darkness that makes these movies so chilling that I feel like they should steer into way more. Like, you've come up with one of the most evil villains, you've created one of the most brutal, like, sad afterlife scenarios, and you just pull away for weird things. Oh well, Gwen and Ernesto try to ask the admins about any of the murders that might have happened, which does not go well at all. They've made this couple the bad type of religious, extremely standoffish, head in the sand to reality, and they have no intention of sharing any information because this isn't like a true crime camp, especially after Gwen starts hitting them with the kindergarten child of a trucker insults. So dead end there, I suppose. Things come to a head that night for both her and Finn though, while she's being led out of her cabin by the dead boys and her mom at one point. Finn has another conversation with the grabber, who reveals his grand plan, and it's kind of boring. Basically said that he worked super hard from hell to remember what happened to him, that he was made to kill his own brother before Finney killed him, and now he wants revenge. Really? We're just gonna go with like a standard little revenge story? Like, I get that that would probably be the main motivation, but I think they could have done more with that. Definitely could have made that a little bit darker. Also, it is not Finn's fault that you had to kill your brother. If you don't remember, the grabber's brother figured out what was going on in the first movie, stumbles on Finn, and then gets axed in the head. Too bad for him though, grabber wants to blame Finn for his own shoddy kidnapping work. There's like a couple things said that hint at some like deeper desires from the grabber here. Basically says that fear is just the warm-up, a little bit of foreplay, but then it just veers fully into revenge, killing Gwen so Finn will understand the pain of losing the only thing that matters to him. Almost manages to do it too, because much like Nightmare on Elm Street, we're gonna go by the die in the nightmare, die in real life rules. So she's just getting launched around the kitchen, people bop in to try to save her and just see like just her being thrown around by nothing. Like, we can see that it's the grabber doing it, but he doesn't actually reflect in real life. So the religious nuts think she's a demon child now, so that's great. Finn shows up in time to stop it, and the grabber just slinks into the shadows of Gwen's half dream. Creepy! Debrief time! They realize after looking at old pictures that the grabber actually used to work at the camp as a handyman with the nickname Wild Bill because he looked like Wild Bill Hickok, WBH. Mondo remembers him from before he reopened the camp and mentioned that he and other employees started seeing things a few years ago lining up with when Finn would have killed the grabber. So I guess after his death, he returned to his first haunting ground where he can feed off the fear of his only missing victims. Scary! I don't think that needed to be laid out so specifically, but that's fine. With Gwen's dreams, they realize that the bodies are probably in the lake because I guess the cops never checked the main lake because it was frozen over when the boys went missing, while completely acknowledging that it was possible to make holes inside it. Come on, people, at least go back in spring. Though I suppose a lot of small town law enforcement are ill-equipped and dumb as fuck. Like, there's literally entire YouTube channels dedicated to divers finding cars and bodies that the cops missed. They also make sure to note that the grabber was a great skater. Oh no! As was obvious from our time in the kitchen there, the grabber is obviously getting stronger the more he's around his victims, and he starts messing with Mondo using a creepy snowman, and I was positive that he was gonna die here while talking to the grabber, but no. Spoiler alert, no one else will die in this movie. Derrickson apparently said in a Q&A that it's because of how gruesome they displayed what happened to the younger boys they couldn't get away with any more on-screen kills or blood. But I really feel like they could have gotten around that. So many movies do way worse. But whatever, this then leads into what is probably my least favorite aspect of this movie that I'm sure a lot of other people really enjoyed. They make the grabber directly involved with the mom's death. At this point, they've already established that the mom was at the camp at the same time the grabber worked there. Mondo remembers her. She's in the pictures. Her camp name was Starlight. And I guess she started having dreams of the missing boys in the town and realized that the killer was Wild Bill. So in the middle of the night, she drives to his house, parks in his driveway, and goes to peer through the windows to see a kid in the basement, where she then, of course, is grabbed by the grabber, tossed into a van, driven back to her house, and he hangs her to make it look self-inflicted. I just don't think things needed to be that connected. That makes it so stupid, and it was already stupid that they were both at the same camp together. It's also hard not to see it as some kind of like religious loophole in a weird way, like, oh, see, she didn't kill herself, she can absolutely go to heaven. I'm sure that wasn't specifically the intention, but I just don't like it. There are moments in this scene that really work though, like the conversations with the grabber are really solid. The movie also makes fun of itself here because after showing us that the mom had a dream of the kidnapping and who did it, Gwen still feels the need to say, she figured out you took him, didn't she? And in that moment, I was like, no shit, girl. Is this whole movie being made for people not actively looking at the screen? But the grabber beat me to it by saying, isn't that obvious? Which I did enjoy, but self-awareness does not absolve you of the sins of bad dialogue. Because she'll immediately do it again because somehow she didn't catch on to what the implication of the grabber grabbing her was and starts wailing. Oh my god, she didn't kill herself, you did it! No shit, you dumbass. Even with the trauma and grief and seeing her mom there in some like weird distorted memory that he wouldn't actually have, there's just no excuse for this. As dumb as it all is, they do flesh out some interesting things about the grabber's time in hell, that it takes the best parts of you and just leaves the sin. And honestly, I think he was already pretty close to existing that way while he was living, but it probably also takes away his fucked up joyful memories too. Oh well, time to try and kill Gwen. Again, making sure to show us that whatever happens to her in the dream will happen to her in real life as her arm slices open in front of Ernesto's eyes. Man, he's doing a really poor job with his one mission of keeping her safe. This is kind of where things get dumb though. I mean, like dumber than they were. She manages to make it away from him, but just as Mondo's coming across one of the bodies under the ice, so the grabber skates up to him very gracefully, starts axing the ice behind him to knock him in. So graceful, so dumb. This is another moment where it seems like Mondo should have died as the grabber's just pushing him under the water, apparently now having the ability to mess with people who aren't even in the dreamscape with him. But as I mentioned, no one else is gonna die. He's fine. They do keep up with the tension and some stressful moments, like they turned Gwen into some kind of phone booth blood tornado, so that was unique. Which is when she learns the power of the mind. That in the dream, she has power too. Which she actually says out loud. Again, just so many things in this movie that don't actually need to be said out loud, but it's like half of this is being made for 5-year-olds. It's just annoying. Trust your audience when it's an R-rated movie. Actually, I just realized that this movie is 14A in Canada, so I'm really doubting their claims that any more kills would have put them at NC-17. Whatever, this time around the dad shows up in a plow to rescue them from the closed roads, and we get another massive round of poorly delivered exposition dump as she tells him what actually happened to the mom. I get that this is information that he needed to know, but it actually doesn't really affect the course of the movie for him to know right now, so there had to be a better way to get it across, or wait till later, or just not bother with it at all. At this point, Finn wants to go so the grabber doesn't kill her, but Gwen won't leave until they put those boys to rest, and the only really useful thing here is Gwen calling them both out on their shit. That Finn's drowning out reality with pot the same way their dad tried to do it with alcohol, and everyone's just turning a blind eye to it, and I know I've said it so many times, that all should have been the major focus of this movie. Not just because it's interesting and feels like it needs to be explored, but also because this kid is a significantly better actor. Like parts of this scene where he's explaining how scared he was in that basement and how it's all he ever thinks about, like it genuinely broke my heart. I believed that he was locked in a basement. But the only way for them to get through it is to face it. Bringing us to the grand Ice-capades finale. And no, I am not exaggerating with the term Ice-capades. While they're looking for the other bodies, Gwen falls asleep and no one can wake her up, so she's got a full out-of-body experience here as the grabber gracefully skates his way up to her. It's just so fucking goofy. This is literally one of like the most menacing on-screen villains that we've had in ages. And now he's ice skating. He ends up knocking Gwen into the ice, which just helps her find the other bodies because they were too far down. And it almost seems like the religious assholes are gonna die pretty brutally, but no, just lightly maimed. With Gwen underwater, the grabber decides to move over to Finn and gracefully jumps in the air, flips over Finn, and then starts to strangle him with a belt. Well, I just haven't seen moves like that since Tanya Harding. But now with the bottom of his mask on to just show his flesh peeled and burned away, which to me actually made him less scary, like just keep the mask on. But because Gwen's bringing up all the bodies, he is starting to lose some of his power, so Finn manages to kick the grabber off of him, which is when Gwen starts speaking at him in Bible verses, which is really just giving "you can't hurt me, not with the power of Jesus on my side" energy, to which the grabber simply responds, "Scripture? God's not here." It's so goofy and for what purpose? It's supposed to be this moment showing the strength of her faith and like the power of her belief and theoretically Christianity. And it is not delivered in a way that makes me feel that at all. Again, I get that Scott Derrickson's had a very long and interesting history with his own faith and religion and Christianity, but my God, no issue with the concept, it's just how they've implemented it. It feels like those old infomercial Christian videos.
Hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
Then, with the help of the victim's spirits, they beat the grabber. Finn just full-on bashes his face into the ice. It's very cathartic, good for him. As the boys pull him under the water, leaving them to be laid to rest. Movie isn't ready to drop the cheese, though. As they're walking away, Gwen hears the phone ring, but Finn doesn't, meaning it must be for her. And it's the mom from beyond the grave. This is so corny. It also kind of felt unsettling to me, like this wasn't really her from the afterlife, or like in Talk to Me, where it's like just this manipulation. I get that it was actually supposed to be intended as a nice and sincere moment and I'm just being a hater, but it just felt so unnatural that I was like, I don't like that. It's actually kind of creepy, but it wasn't their intention. The end. And despite my complaints, not terrible, pretty entertaining, especially when you're watching it in theaters with a big audience, but it's just so damn goofy too much of the time. It really feels like they do so much to undercut any of their established tension and tone almost immediately after they get it. And unfortunately, a lot of that's just coming down to the dialogue and how it was delivered. I think these are both movies with a ton of great ideas and some of the writing's really strong. It doesn't necessarily always carry over to what the characters are saying. And you notice that the strength comes from those people that are actually delivering the lines. So I know like Ethan Hawke, given a lot of leeway to kind of play the character the way he felt was best. You get this chilling character. You get Mason, who's good at delivering the emotions. So you get more out of Finn. The movie's absolutely at its strongest early on, even if I do love the snowy setting once they get there. It just didn't feel like they followed through in the best way of the story, for the story, in my opinion. Honestly, I will say on first watch, I thought I liked this one more than the first movie, but after rewatching that one, I think I do actually like part one more. Main takeaway for me though is both of these movies have the capacity to be a hell of a lot better than they actually were. They have the capacity to be amazing, but they're a good enough time. But let me know what you guys are thinking of this one down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Have you seen it? Have you not? Do you like the first movie more than this one or vice versa? Do you have any thoughts on my thoughts? I would love to know. But that's gonna do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.